Okay, here we are. We are live with Wake Up Call Live, and we are having two very special guests today. Two prominent family law attorneys, Sandy Durst from New Jersey, my home state, and Donna Conviser from a family law attorney in Connecticut. And they are joining me today to talk about the documentary Divorce Corp. And I'm so sorry my phone is ringing, but I told you we might have some tech issues, and there we go. But they are here to talk about Divorce Corp. I've been very vocal about it in the past week or so because I watched again the documentary Divorce Corp, which if you haven't seen it, watch it. But it does completely put all divorce attorneys and the entire divorce system on blast. And I kind of wanted to hear what other attorneys think about a lot of what we saw in Divorce Corp, if they agreed with it, if they disagreed with it, where was their truth, where did they get it wrong, and generally talk about ways that we can potentially improve our divorce system. And I wanted to hear that from you guys. So thank you for joining me. Let me start. Tell me what you guys thought of Divorce Corp, like your initial reaction.
I 100% agreed with it. I wished it had gone a little further. I think that the problem is that clients, people going through divorces, don't watch things like this. So they come in with a lot of extremely false beliefs about what is about to happen to them. And just as a couple of examples, first of all, they think that there is justice in family court because they think that the judge wants to listen to them, that his or her case is unique, and the judge is going to see that. They think that the GAL has to side with him or her. They think their retainer is going to cover the whole case. They think that the judge is going to punish the other side for bad acts, and that the judge is going to get back any money, assets, anything that disappeared before the divorce. And most of all, they think that the divorce is going to cure the problems. And that somehow when you get your divorce judgment, everybody behaves and follows everything that it says. And that's just, as I think we know, sadly, not the truth.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's a list we could go on and on. We can make that list a lot longer, but I want to hear what your initial reaction was too, Sandy. Can you hear me, Sandy?
I agree that our clients too often come to us with, yeah. Can you hear me now, Christina?
Yeah, I think there might be a little bit of a delay on your mic.
A delay? So I'll just keep rambling.
Yeah, just keep going.
Our clients come to us and any number of sources. The system's not perfect. I can't sit here after 20 years and make that promise to anyone, but I think the representation in the documentary is horrible. I mean, I think it's an agenda piece. I think you'd find bad judges, and some of those people were absolutely. I'd like to know more about some of the litigants, some of the clients. It's not a great system, but the system's not as inherently evil or destructive as they wanted to believe, what they want like everyone to believe. And I don't believe that the majority, the destroyer of families and the unethical, money hungry, monsters they want to portray us as. I think more than defending the system, we need to equally defend ourselves and explain to the public who we are and what we do and how we do it. And that will go a long way towards addressing some of this conception.
I just think it's so hard to do that because the way the system, I think, is set up is that you have this, the inner circle, and you have those attorneys who immediately show up connected to judges. Judges were lawyers. They come from firms. You know, they're supposed to recuse themselves, but they still knew the lawyers when they were in private practice. And I think that, you know, there are lawyers who just immediately get a red carpet treatment and a lot of passes. And it's hard. It's hard for sometimes the better lawyers who are not connected to the system to be heard and to be seen. And I don't know how we make that kind of an impact because it's just the whole business enterprise, I think, has become too big.
Well, I agree with that. Well, first, I'd like to just kind of say my initial thoughts when I watched it. I watched it twice. I watched it when it first came out, which I want to say it was 2014. It's a bit dated at this point. I don't know how much the system has really changed, though, so it probably still applies to any conversation today. But when I first watched it, being maybe a less experienced attorney, I've been practicing 18 years. So 10 years ago would have been 8 years, right? Which you learn a lot in those 10 years. I think there's a difference between someone who's been practicing 8 years and someone who's been practicing 18. My practice has changed. Back then I was working for someone else. Now I have my own firm. And I think my perspective on divorce has changed a lot during that time. So when I watched it back then, I totally agreed with Sandy. Like, that was my opinion. I thought it was nothing but hyperbole. It was an assault on lawyers and the divorce system, really blaming us for everything. But as I watched it, in the past few days, I thought there was some hyperbole. And really egregious. The hyperbole that was there was egregious, but I didn't think it was all totally untrue. I thought that there were a lot of points made that I think there's truth and value to them now. And I think the biggest problem I had with it is they really found the most egregious examples of divorce cases that just dragged on forever, or people that were taken advantage of, maybe by judges or experts. And then the entire thing was about them, as though this is representative of the entire system. And that's not true. That's really where the hyperbole was. But, my feelings over the past more recent years is that I do think that there are far too many attorneys that are part of the problem, are part of why divorces take so long and why they're so expensive. That's not all of them. There's a lot of wonderful attorneys out there that are doing good things and encouraging litigants to settle. And in my opinion, really helping a family in crisis, because that's what it is, that the people we see, right? They're in crisis. Donna, just in case you don't know, we lost your video. So, I think those people that are doing good things, great. But then what about the ones that aren't? I think the way that the system is designed, it allows them a very comfortable environment to keep litigation going, to charge a ton of money, to make people liquidate all their retirement accounts. And I could tell, Sandy, you want to say something. One last comment, though, on that is... My other criticism of Divorce Corp is that it really didn't seem to put any responsibility whatsoever on the litigants. And we know that if a lot of times
none at all, and
keep it going.
that's
Oh, you're frozen, Sandy.
With clients who I've developed good relationships with, that if you would just sign a waiver, go away for 6 months, I will settle your case quickly, cheaply, and within dollars of what you think you're entitled to. I can't do that. I mean, we're ethically prohibited, but we did not grieve them.
Oh man, you're cutting out. I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Yeah. Oh, am I?
Well, let me just tell you, if I can, what I can tell you what happened in Connecticut. Back in about 2014, there were some divorcing parents who took on the GAL system. And
explain what that is, because New Jersey, we have guardian ad litem, but it sounds like it's required in every divorce case in Connecticut. Is that the case?
It is not, but
Okay.
if there is any sort of mention of a significant parenting dispute at all, the judges, they immediately would say, all right, I want a GAL, because they become the eyes and ears of the court, and they're going to go out and investigate this. And the attorneys are biased because they have their clients, and I want the independent GAL. But what was happening was that you had a top tier of GALs, probably about 10 to 20 of them, but really 10 at the very top of this tier, at least in the Hartford area. I'm not, and when I say the Hartford area in Connecticut, Fairfield County, down Stamford, the New York border, that was an entirely different situation, because the people there tend to have much more money to fund their cases. But the parents up in the Hartford area, they were running out of money for GAL fees. And they had some GALs who were making well over $1 million a year on their GAL cases alone. That's just not their family law practice, just GAL cases. So these parents were given orders by judges to liquidate retirement accounts, to sell a house, to pay the GALs. So eventually they got a couple of state legislators who listened to them. And the legislature, I think it was 2016, maybe about that year, put in all new laws about GAL practice. And the judges now have to set a fee. They have to look at the incomes of the parents. They have to give a list of what the GALs are supposed to be doing so that there's accountability. They have to come back to court and account for their time regularly. And so now what we're left with is that most of those GALs no longer do GAL work, because they're not going to make that kind of money. So they're not interested. And the top offender became a judge, family court judge. So go figure that one. But what happened is we have now a supposed nonprofit GAL center in the Hartford area, covers pretty much half the state of Connecticut. And they get funding from the state, but they also have charity events, auctions, and who supports them but the family bar. So, here we go again. And it just is an endless cycle, although people are paying much less to at least get a GAL. And to their credit, most of the GALs now just come back with 50-50 shared equal parenting time. That's another thing that parents don't understand. I don't know if Sandy sees that, but litigants could save themselves a lot of aggravation if they would just listen to their attorneys, who tell them, as Sandy said, how your case is going to turn out. Go away for 6 months, and when you get back, it'll be like I told you it was going to be.
I think that's a great idea. I don't know if we can ever get it to that extreme, but that was a point that I made earlier, is that the people in Divorce Corp, whoever these producers were, this vehicle behind it, there really was no responsibility on the part of the litigants. It's kind of like, I hate to compare them to drug dealers, but it's like, drug dealers wouldn't be in business if there weren't people using drugs and wanted to buy their product. So, if the litigants wanted to settle their cases more amicably, then we wouldn't have clients, right? Or the cases would just be shorter. There wouldn't be opportunities for the unscrupulous attorneys to overbill and churn the file. So I do think that the litigants have to be part of what they're complaining about. We can't just blame all of the attorneys for it. And then Sandy, you put a note in the chat that are the judges elected in Connecticut, or are they appointed like they are in New Jersey?
I mean, a lot of the problem.
They're appointed. Okay.
A lot of the problems in the documentary, and another thing that kind of infuriated me, is they took California and extrapolated it to everywhere else in the country. And I don't really want California to be, the bar for much of anything. But they were elected, and they explained the issues with, the campaign contributions. And I think that is, that's a problem. We've all done the networking thing with judges and other lawyers, and I don't have a big problem with that. But if I am literally paying to get you elected, you have a record of who donated to your campaign, that's a problem. I don't think judges should ever be elected.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that. I mean, I've heard this in the past, but that surprised me that there are states that do that. All right. So then what about ways? I mean, do you have ideas about ways to improve the system so that it, is fair to litigants, gives them an opportunity to be heard, but at the same time doesn't let attorneys that are willing to let it run amok? What do you think?
See, I think a lot of that is on the judges. And I know that they cannot get involved and tell a lawyer, how to represent a client or how to do their case. But, I have had cases where judges have said, this case should not go to trial. And they have brought the clients into the pretrial, and they've told them it shouldn't go to trial. And they tell them why. And starts with, because you don't have the money to do it. And second, you're not going to accomplish anything that both of you think you're going to accomplish. This is going to go down the middle, and you're going to have to live with each other in this divorce. And you need to learn how to do that. And in Connecticut, they have a program called Special Masters. It unfortunately went away during COVID, but it's back. And Special Masters, they set up teams of male, female lawyers once a week. And the masters volunteer their time, but the litigants have to pay their attorneys to prepare to go to masters. So, and then you go in and the male, female lawyer team listens to both sides, and then they come up with what they think a judge would do to settle that case.
Yeah, it sounds like ESP.
Right.
All right, so 93% of cases apparently settle after special masters. And when I've been a master, I had a couple of cases that had really tough legal issues that the two masters could not answer. And they usually involved complex things like if one party was already living off of their pension and the other party was still working, is that pension income or is it an asset? Does it get divided? What do you do? And so
those don't seem like complicated legal issues, though. I mean, Does it?
That one was. I mean, that
Okay.
probably had to go to. They needed to get some experts in there because the husband had been a state trooper and he retired out at 47. And the wife was still working. She was a nurse. She was going to work for a long time. And she said, you know, I am making $80,000 and he wants alimony. There's no way I'm going to pay him alimony. And I should be entitled to half of his pension because he's asking for half of mine when I eventually get it. And, you know, the question was, what did he have to work again? I mean, if he didn't work again, yeah, I suppose that he should have to live on his pension, but he also should not get any share of hers when her pension comes around. But that's the kind of issue that sometimes at special masters, you know, we would say, you're going to have to talk to, you know, different experts for that. But, and Sandy just asked if the masters could deal with custody and parenting, and they just started with that. Yes, as of the end of COVID. Before
Yeah,
that,
that's
no.
good because I know ESP, they don't. We have something
Right.
similar in New Jersey called ESP, Early Settlement Panel, to, you know, I mean, everything in the system is designed to give the parties plenty of opportunities to settle.
Right.
and I
Except
know-
they know that's
I have these.
they know
Go
our
ahead,
recommendations are non-binding. So it's an opportunity, but if they're not invested in settling the case, they pay their attorney for an hour or two to sit there with us and they go on. But I agree with Donna. I think it starts with the judges. They need to be, first of all, they need to be paid more so that we can get people out of private practice onto the bench. We have a tremendous amount of judges who have come from the government, and they are wonderful, wonderful people, sharp minds, but they don't understand, and they have never had to deal with the practice of law with real clients and emotion. So I think we need in New Jersey, at least, we need to figure out how we can get more relevant people on the bench. Once they're there, I think they need to check the bad behavior much more vigorously. You know, grant some early fee awards. Hold the bad attorneys and the bad litigants responsible at the beginning, and I think you'll bring some of this, to a halt. It starts from the top down. I mean, I think the judges have to be more active. I think we need, to be more active and police ourselves. But at the end of the day, we do have that obligation to do what our clients want us to do, as long as it's ethical and supported by the law. And this is a gray area practice. There's no, you can in good faith take a whole lot of positions and a whole lot of approaches to things.
There is very little law.
You can only do that though if your client wants you to. And I know that there are times when you guys must have experienced this, that you're trying to settle a case and you get the feeling that the case would settle, but the attorney won't let the other ones let their client settle. Because I don't know, they have to win, they feel like they can do better. But that upsets me because it's not up to the attorney to decide what that person ultimately settles to. I always feel that it's my responsibility to educate them. If you're going to waive alimony, it's your life. I always say everybody gets to make their own bad decisions. You can do that. But I'm going to make sure that you understand that you're giving something up and that you're not going to be able to change that later. And I'll have them acknowledge that in writing.
Right.
So that they can't come back later and blame me for it.
We've all been there. I have any number of files with 3, 4, 5 page and longer letters explaining all of my advice, where I think it can go, where I think it should go, what you're giving up. And as you said, Christine, it's your life. You're an adult. You can decide to make this awful deal. You know, I don't like attorneys who hold up settlements, but I understand the fear of a frivolous malpractice suit. I understand I have my own firm. It's me. I understand the fear of a disgruntled client taking that monthly invoice and putting it right in the trash. I mean, we are not at our client's beck and call, and we can't do everything they demand of us. But there are real practical considerations that we have to recognize they exist.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. You know what I'd like to see them do?
Very true.
Though I remember when I was a young attorney, and I guess I've been doing this long enough now that I can start comparing how they used to do things and how they do things now. But when I first started out in around 2003, so like the 5 to 10 years after that, I was very actively involved in litigation and didn't have my own firm, so I wasn't handling firm management issues. But I remember you would get a trial date. I think you got it on the initial case management order in the beginning. You would know your trial date very early on in the case. And I thought that was helpful because it kind of gave you a timeline that you were working against. Because, and I'm sure you can both attest to this, how many cases have you settled like right on the trial day or very soon before that, because the parties knew, well, if we don't settle now, I have to pay my attorney some big fat retainer to start doing trial prep, or I have to start a trial. And that would get them to settle.
I remember that too, Christine. I thought it was wonderful. The systematic problem now is compounded. And not only do we not get that date, I have gone months in between trial dates once we start. So I am duplicating preparation. I am doing more work again and again. I am dealing with new issues that have come up. We're starting the custody case. We're a day or two in there's an intervening domestic violence case, or there's an intervening, job relocation that the system has allowed to become a problem because they're so overwhelmed and can't get us consecutive trial dates, or even trial dates. I'd love to be coming in every Monday. Like once you get started, you need to get finished. Because that pressure on people and that cost is a big motivator to settle.
And then you think about the effect on the children.
Ugh.
And they talked about it a little in this documentary, probably not enough, because I have to remind, I'm going to say at least 80% of my clients not to talk to their children about the divorce or what is happening. And they just cannot handle it. And so when they have a GAL, in that way, yes, Sandy, the litigants are causing their own misery, because then the children are upset. And then it starts the whole, it's like back to square one again, instead of being able to move ahead. Because when things go on for too long, yes, there's all these intervening events. And, mom or dad gets a new significant other, and then that throws everything off the rails.
Yeah,
and then people, and people want to, and they kept saying in this, documentary that people want to win. And I do think that's true.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think,
but is there a winner? There's no winner.
There's no winner. I think by winning, our clients want validation. They want to be told that they are right. They were the worthy spouse. They were the good parent. You know, I'm lucky in that my practice, I don't really see a lot of really, really bad parents. They're all okay until they get divorced and they get loony. But,
Yeah.
you know, that's not, I try to tell people that's not what, this is not a moral court. This is not, you know, the judge is not going to come out with, you know, one white cowboy hat and put it on you and one black cowboy hat and put it on your ex-spouse because you're the good or bad, you know, actor in this. And that's hard for people to swallow. It's a hard pill that, you know, I don't know what all the grounds for divorce are in Connecticut, but, you know, when I tell people that it doesn't matter if your spouse had an affair or if your spouse is, you know, works too much or, you know, isn't warm and fuzzy. It's, the law doesn't care who did what or why. And that's you know, I don't think we need to go back to fault. I think it would make the guys in the documentary who wanted to go back to fault and jury trials are insane.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't want to go parading, you know, my client's marriage to a jury of their peers who are, you know, in their community, might know, you know, it would be fun as heck for us, but it would be absolutely damn. I mean, it would be so destructive that.
Right. And then it becomes pure theater for a lot of lawyers.
Let's just put all our
you know, it is already some theater, but, you know, I have cases with absolutely horrible, bad, evil parents. Mm-hmm. And those are very frustrating. They're usually almost always on the other side. And I have to, you know, explain to my client, this is where I was saying at the beginning that people think that, you know, you get a court order for parenting time and that other parent is going to follow the order. And week one, the other parent doesn't follow the order. And, you know, as I say, who loses? The child. Because the child knows, you know, sort of when he or she is supposed to be with the other parent, if they're, you know, of a sufficient age to know that. And then it doesn't happen. And then there's, you know, hysteria and upset and yelling and screaming. And now with cell phones, there's texting by, you know, the parent who's not getting the time. And then he's with the other parent, and the parent's telling him, you know, you're not going. And I spent the day after Thanksgiving in one of these battles. And, you know, the GAL isn't up and running yet. Hopefully he gets up and running soon because here comes Christmas. But, you know, I have had to explain to my client that this is going to take time and that there is a very difficult parent on the other side. And he thinks, though, because there's a court order that it's going to be followed. And so
it's just a piece of paper.
As I say, right. I say these things are just myths. Nothing changes because you got divorced. And this client actually.
Right.
Yeah. I've told many a client, I can't make your spouse not be an asshole.
Right. So I know I've done this for 20 years. Before that, my dad did it for about 45. And Christina, you might remember my dad.
I do.
He had one of his clients, this is way before Harry Potter, one of his clients gifted him a magic wand. And he kept it on the windowsill behind his office. And my dad was a smartass. More often than not, a client would ask him what it was. He would pick it up and he would flick it. And the client would go, it's not doing anything. And he goes, you're absolutely right. I do not have a magic wand to make you more money, your spouse more reasonable, your kids drug-free, like whatever the problems are, we can't undo those. I try to tell all my clients, divorce, it's the end of your marriage, but my goal is to move you forward and to get you into whatever's next in your life on the best 2 feet you can. I can't go back and redo the past. And no matter how much money you don't have the money for me to go back and explain the past to everyone because it doesn't matter. and you're going to kill yourself, literally or figuratively, if you don't get through, whatever you're hung up on.
And I agree with all that. But I'm still left wondering a lot lately. Is the system designed in such a way, like you said, there's a lot of gray? Is there just too much gray? Because that's what allows people to engage in these ridiculous fights for the ridiculous amount of time that they do it, which ends up, if it's a lot of time, it's costing you a lot of money. That's just how it is.
The system allows the ridiculous litigants and either the unskilled or malicious, or a combination of the two, attorneys to exploit that. But we can't forget, we're dealing with real people and real situations, and every family is so different and so unique that we have child support guidelines. That's probably in New Jersey. That's probably the most uniform kind of across the board application of anything we have. I laughed out loud when they said how much better it is in Sweden or Denmark or wherever, where there's no alimony. We don't care how much money you make. We don't care how long you've been married, or if you actually are dependent on your spouse. We're just not going to give it to you. So
that doesn't solve everything either.
That doesn't solve. It'll make your divorce done quicker, but at what cost?
What cost?
People.
Well, what I found interesting about that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
The divorce rate, they said, was comparable.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, people, I was going to say that I think some people get divorced too quickly. They decide that things are getting a little tough, and so they're not going to be married anymore. Right. And then they don't understand that it can get a whole lot worse to deal with the other person and your situation after your divorce, especially because you're not going to be able to live as financially, secure, separated than you were when you were together, at least in most cases.
Right. And
so then things get really tough because one person does better financially than the other. And then somebody's paying child support. And, child support guidelines. It's interesting you mentioned that. I had a client once who came to me and said, well, how much am I going to have to give her for child support? I said, well, first of all, you don't give somebody child support. Child support is determined, by these guidelines. And I said, look at this. You come up with the total income for both of you, the total net income for both of you. Then the child support has been calculated by the state. Right. And then that's divided proportionately by your income.
They don't care. They think the ex-wife is going to get her nails done with it.
Yeah, but he said he never understood that. He said, I never understood that. I said, well, now you do. Right. So you're not giving anybody anything.
He was okay with
it. And alimony is a division of marital income. It's not a gift.
Right.
But, people talk to their neighbors, their coworkers, their sisters or brothers who went through it. And I always, they're like, well, wait a minute. Why aren't I going to get this? Or why aren't I going to get that? And
yeah,
I think that's a big problem. There's so much information out there, and so little of it's reliable. I mean, people don't know. You don't know what your neighbor's income is when you find out, your tennis buddy got $5,000 a month in alimony, or nothing. Maybe she's got a huge trust fund. I get I love the clients whose sister-in-law in Colorado, the high school football coach's wife is a real estate attorney, but she thinks this is what I should ask for.
Yeah.
Okay,
I know.
I can't combat your.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, we could look, we could complain all day about all these kinds of things, but I was hoping to hear more about your proposed solutions. Have you, I mean, you guys have been doing this a long time. Have you ever, washing your hair in the shower? You know what? I bet this would work. I mean, we all have those moments, right? Like where we think, why aren't we doing something this way?
I think incentivizing the right people to become judges is a start. I think strengthening, giving those judges the backbone. I mean, whether I said, like before, I said to do counsel fee awards, to do some type of sanctions. I can't tell you the last time I had an order to show cause denied or a request for a restraining order denied. And I understand the dilemma the judges are in with those applications, but some of them are just absolute BS. And when you give life to those and you are then empowering that litigant to keep doing things that, are an abuse of the system.
So you think make it harder to have an order to show cause granted or harder to get a restraining order?
The restraining order, I'm a little more, I mean, if you're going to err on the side of a restraining order, err on the side of protection, but giving, in New Jersey, we're supposed to have that hearing in 10 days. That is not, I mean, I'm looking at 30, 60, 90 days, and that's terrible.
That's true. You're right.
The order to show causes, I've had them, I don't know if this has happened to you, Katrina, I've had them, denied, but we're going to convert it into a motion. If it's denied, it's denied. Kill it and tell that litigant, you lose this one. We're not going to drag it out and make me and my client respond to something you've already said you don't think is all that meritorious. We have
judges are afraid because
right.
If they
on their domestic violence side, I agree 100%. The judicial calls, they're different. In New Jersey, we have this CLE requirement, except I don't need to take 1 minute of New Jersey family law to satisfy my requirements. I don't know what the answer is, but we need to do a better job of training and educating those. In New Jersey, we're not allowed to say we specialize in anything, which I think is awful because it allows this jack of all trades mentality. I've done nothing but family law for 20 years. I could get all of my ethics credits, my education credits in corporate taxation, and that's acceptable.
Same in Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
But assuming that the documentary is correct and that this is a business enterprise.
Well, it is. How can we say
a lot of people? Okay. And that it's connected between the judges and the guardians ad litem and the, experts and so on and so forth. How are you going to get that system to correct itself? It's like the Little Shop of Horrors plant. Feed me, feed me,
statutes.
Feed me.
I mean, of course, the lawyers are all the ones enacting the statutes. So, divorce court might be onto something there.
Well, so what do you do? Limit the time that a divorce can take place? So you say there will be no divorce that goes longer than 14 months or 15 months.
I'm in support of a statute. I know there was some discussion of it in New Jersey. I don't know what they have in Connecticut, but a presumption that custody should be 50-50. I think that has potential to help cut back on litigation.
Except it's not, though. I mean, I fought against this. I mean,
you have?
Yeah, because, whether it's in our executive committee or in court, 50-50. I mean, and when I look back over my marriage, when my daughter was growing up, I can't, in terms of time, my ex and I might have spent close to 50-50, but given all our other demands, that wasn't, how that's structured, doesn't lend itself to two separate households. I might not see my daughter from 7 in the morning till 7 at night because I'm working or I have meetings. But and then I think the biggest problem with that is what litigants would then need to bring up to rebut that presumption will be all the bad stuff, will be all the horrible stuff. It can't be 50-50.
They're doing that already. They do that now.
True.
I mean, I don't know if this would cut back on litigation. Maybe it won't, because you can rebut a presumption. Maybe the same people that would have been fighting over custody anyway will still be fighting over custody. I don't know. We wouldn't know until we tried it. But
it would stop people from filing because they think things are going to get better and easier. They would have the harsh reality that it's going to be, there's going to be a new way of living. And so especially the problem is that it probably intimidates women more than men, because I think the women still tend to do the majority of the parenting time. And
I think that there's a misperception.
They're not going to file.
There's a misperception. I think they already have that fear. I hear that a lot, but I hear it from men too. And I think we live in an age where we shouldn't assume that the women are the ones doing most of the parenting. They are in some families, but not in all families. I don't think in this day and age, we can't assume that.
I think I agree. And I hate to be broad stroked or stereotypical. In some of the custody and parenting time cases that I've had that have gone off the rails, it's because mom is mom and he can't be better than me. And my kids will fall into a personal and moral abyss if I am not mom in perpetuity.
I agree with that. Yeah, I see that.
I agree with that also.
It's
a tough. I'm just saying that it's kind of, I think, a sort of chilling,
I think it already does, though. I mean, I think anybody who's contemplating divorce is worried about two things. If there's kids, custody, and I think dads worry about it too, because they still think that there's favoritism towards women in the system. They believe that. I mean, I think it's far less than it used to be. And I think it depends what judge you get. I was a law clerk. Yes. I heard what they said in chambers. And sometimes they did favor the moms. But I think that's less so. And I think the people that are getting divorced, they already have those worries. I don't think having a 50-50 presumption is going to change that aspect of things.
What about the fact that child support is wrapped up sometimes with 50-50 custody? A lot of people don't understand that you also have to have similar incomes in order to immediately have no child support, but it does become a factor for some people.
It does, but if you're fighting about child support, I think we all agreed that most of the cases we're handling, they're middle class people. They're going to be fighting about that no matter what, and it's unfortunate that reality is when two people are getting divorced, unless there's a lot of money to go around, they aren't going to live the same way separately.
I mean, people use the parenting time as a personal wedge. They use it because they think it'll impact child support. And And what I've done with any number of clients is I've run 3 or 4 or 5 sets of our child support guidelines and said, if you win whatever you think your parenting time, home run is, here's what child support would be. Here's 3 or 4 other iterations. If you give them 50-50, here's what it is. And by and large, you're talking about really inconsequential numbers across that spectrum, particularly when your alternative is to pay me $4,000 a day to go fight for one of those options for you. Send your kid to college, not mine.
Yeah.
I find most of the child support disputes really a fear over an ability to pay it. I mean, I'm not going to be able to live. And,
I agree with that. I agree with that.
You're spending this money. You're spending one thing people don't. You're spending the money already. My daughter just texted me. She needs something for her, sorority semi-formal, or her car needs something. I'm either paying her money or I'm sending her, her mom $300 for child. The money's there. It's a fear. And then, like in the documentary, all these horror stories of people who are taken to jail because they fall behind, or,
Well, we know that doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen. It
happens in Connecticut. In Hartford, it does.
Well, in New Jersey,
we have magistrates. See, child support is handled by magistrates, and the magistrates feel that they have only one issue to deal with, which is child support.
So,
and they don't have much patience.
But the law in New Jersey is that if the court has to make a finding that you have the ability to pay it.
Right.
And if you're not, when you have the ability, then they can put you in jail.
But they don't.
I mean, I don't find that it's the rich guy from Wall Street that's getting dragged in front of the judge.
No.
It's the guy that has a criminal record and a drug problem and works off the books and makes cash and doesn't have a driver's license or a bank account. That's the guy that's going in front of the judge. They're not putting him in jail.
Back to your question about the system, Christina, and I say this without knowing what the current state of their kind of system or the backlogs are. But I went to law school in Chicago and clerked for a judge while I was in law school, and I worked for a firm out there for a couple of years. Their bench was set up pre-trial, trial, and post-judgment judges. So they had 3 tiers. You didn't have judges doing the entire case start to finish. And at least my experience then was it made judges available. It made time available. Because your judge who's conducting the trial, I'm not trying to file a motion for, or I'm not trying to come in and have a case management conference with this judge, because it broke it up. And I think the other thing it did, and we know judges talk and they share their file, but you didn't have the same impetus to tell your whole story to this judge, because once I'm done with this issue, I'm on to judge number 2. And I don't need that same history. I don't need that same sob story getting repeated, because if it gets repeated, it's costing me more money. But I always thought that would be an interesting structure for us to look at in New Jersey.
That is interesting.
Yeah. There should be one judge on your case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. The other thing too that I'm sure you guys have heard of before too is, why aren't there alimony guidelines?
There are in Massachusetts.
Ooh, I'm gonna have to look into that. I mean, when I say this to people, sometimes they're like, "Oh God, that won't work, and that's inequitable to the parties." But you know what? Somebody at some point probably thought child support guidelines weren't a great idea either. And look at how we use that now. No, how often do we deviate from that unless it's a high income situation?
I know. Chuck Votto wants alimony guidelines.
Maybe I should invite Chuck on here.
I am fine with a more uniform application that is ideally designed to take care of kids. I don't think parents should have the latitude. It shouldn't be a windfall. It shouldn't be, poverty level. You have an obligation to support your kids. Alimony, I've had spouses that have a lot of money and live at levels that are shocking to me on the low end. I mean, rented house, Goodwill furniture, people spend it differently. People structure their lives differently. There's more that goes into why someone is working or not. Parenting time. I don't know. I don't know what the variables. I don't know enough. I don't know how you would.
Couldn't there? I mean, I get what you're addressing there, but couldn't there be threshold questions, a threshold inquiry into whether is this an alimony case? I'm generalizing because we know husbands get alimony, but is wife entitled to alimony? Should she be working? I mean, we do that now, really. I mean, we
do it now, and I do like, with our. I got to stop calling it the new alimony statute because
I know it's not
2014 or something. We got rid of the permanent, which I think is good. Did
we just swap it out for open durational though?
It's easier to terminate. Yeah, you still have the presumption it ends when the payor retires, which before wasn't there. And it does a better on the shorter term marriages. It does a much better job of connecting the term of alimony to the length of the marriage, which I think we didn't have as much before.
Yeah, I don't know what you guys have, Donna, but we used to have what was called permanent alimony, which
we had that.
Okay, so if somebody got that, there was no end date unless you negotiated that in the settlement. Now,
but again, in Connecticut, retirement usually was of the payor was usually a moment that they got a second look.
It was not.
Sorry.
The problem in New Jersey, Donald, that it was not, and more often than not, judges would say your retirement. So we can modify anytime there's a change of circumstances, substantial change of circumstances. And judges would say, you knew you were going to retire. It's not a change. So we've switched it and made it, I guess, a rebuttable presumption now, which I think helps.
I just lost one where the husband's a lawyer and he said, I'm 72. I want to retire. And the wife said, well, I need the alimony for another 2 years so that I can, be able, she had become a hoarder. She said, I just can't get rid of my house immediately. I'm going to have to take some time for this. You just can't, pull the rug out from under me. And it was in the New Haven Judicial District, and they pulled the rug out. They said, he's done. He's 72. This is not, permanent prison for him to be paying you. And, I had just asked for a gradual payout. I said, let's, we can cut back on the amount after 6 months and go down till we do this for 2 years. He said, nope, I'm done now.
But this is the litigation that we're talking about. This is this is it. This is the dialogue that, there's a wonderful environment for people who want to litigate and fight over things.
There is, but there's also a wonderful environment for, not to pat ourselves on the back, but people like the three of us and most of our colleagues who know what we're doing, do it ethically, and most importantly, do it with an eye on getting our clients and their kids through this. So that same gray area that causes all the problems in the documentary although, like, I'm not sure the judge who beat his kid is really a judicial
Oh my
system
God, that was
problem.
terrible.
He's an awful human being. I mean, but
Or the porn star GAL.
well, yeah, I mean, only in California. The same gray area that lends itself to the abuses gives all the rest of us amazing opportunities to use our skills and use our knowledge to create resolutions that are on the opposite end of that work for our client and meet their unique needs and their personal needs, without just kind of rote application of, we want to get rid of disagreements, so here's how your case is going to get resolved. We're not a Social Security disability case where if you lose 2 of your fingers and you made this much, you're entitled to X.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that.
The only problem is that we have to meet each other on those cases. And too often we meet the lawyers in the documentary.
Yeah, I mean, look, we all know, who they are. If you practice family law regularly and you've been around a bit, you know who they are. We all know that there's that one or two, maybe 3 people where you hear the name and you're like, oh, good Lord, this is never going to stop. We all know those people.
I've got a longer list than you.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's probably more than 3, but. And, then I think, unfortunately, these days you see a lot of people that are dabbling in family law because they think it's easy and, it's some easy money and they screw it up. Or they argue for ridiculous things. They don't even know what they're talking about. Or unfortunately, I get clients sometimes who used a dabbler and now they're having problems because their settlement agreement wasn't done properly. And sometimes you can fix it and sometimes you can't. And
I've had any number of clients who they come in, they do a consultation with me. I tell them what their issues are. I give them the best idea as to where I see the costs are, what my hourly rate is. It's too expensive. They go hire someone else. And 8 months later, they're back. And I have to double. If I can do anything for them, what was $5,000 is now $7,500 because I need to go do what I can to undo all of that stuff.
Yeah, and some of it you can't even undo.
Some of it you can't do, and that's heartbreaking.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like there's so many topics that we could just do like an offshoot, do like a whole new show and talk about some of these other things. But perhaps it was a little too
Sandy and I disagreed. So, I thought the documentary.
I like when people disagree. I mean, we're not going to agree on everything. We're not going to agree on
a couple of the
everything.
extremes. I thought it was right on, not the extreme examples.
I definitely thought there were some things that were spot on. I hope, sometimes I wonder if I'm just oversimplifying things or just trying to oversimplify divorce, but I'm not giving up on my idea that I think the system could be changed and perhaps laws enacted, substantive and procedural, that would just make the divorce system less hospitable to the people that do like to just fight and lawyers that want to just kind of churn the file. I think that there's definitely ways for us to improve the system, but still do good things for families.
The system needs work.
I agree with that.
My biggest issue with the documentary was that it's all our fault.
Yes. Yes.
And the insinuation that, that we're all in bed together and, that it's just a pure money grab. But the system does need improvement. And I think the other problem is the people who are good in the system are already so overburdened and overtaxed that, we're the ones who need to fix it. It's just finding 5, 6, 7, 8 more hours in the day to find another cause. And that's tough.
Yeah. And, I agree with you about the judges. I often think to myself, this judge, so-and-so that's on this case, they're not qualified to represent a person in a divorce because they've never done it and they don't know what they're talking about. Yet here they are on the bench making decisions and rulings about a divorce case.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to see more family people get on the bench.
I would. That's a whole, and then how you get appointed, that's a whole nother political nightmare. I think they should be appointed by the Bar Association, not the legislature. But.
So, all right. So we've come up on an hour. Thank you for your time. Just to summarize, we have solved the problem and all we need is a presumption of 50-50 custody and alimony guidelines and done with that now.
It's good. And I just need a bigger cut of the $50 billion a year industry that we're in.
Yeah.
Except that there's always deviations.
There are.
So of course I'm just making fun, but thank you. I think you guys presented a lot of good ideas I had never thought of, so I appreciate that. Thank you, and
thank you for putting this together.
Yeah, I love it.
Thank you.
And I'm actually doing this again tomorrow with other guests, attorneys from around the country. So if you want to hear more, you can join us tomorrow again at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we'll see what some of our other colleagues have to say.
We can't wait.
So,
thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great holiday.
Thank you. Happy holidays.